Yoon's been a lame duck president since essentially he lost a working majority in the parliament in the last election, decided spectacularly this week to declare martial law in order to essentially, it would seem, get what he wanted done through Parliament. Now, of course, martial law is the imposition of restrictions on gatherings, on civil society's ability to meet and to disseminate information or to protest, matters like that. The actual move was then reversed basically overnight by the Parliament itself, which is exempt from martial law rulings anyway, and voted immediately and unanimously from the people who were actually in the chamber at the time of voting to lift the martial law. The president then had little choice but to comply, and now, of course, he is likely to be impeached by Parliament, and they're going to try, at least the opposition will try and impeach him for what he just did. So in a sense, it was an extraordinary move by one man to subvert South Korea's democracy, and a democracy that's been in place now for 50 years, and try and get his will through. And it failed dramatically, and the end outcome can only be his a resignation or impeachment, because he's destroyed the system that he was pledged to safeguard. I think South Korea has made huge democratic strides since the last dictatorship that ended in 1979. Democracy is ensconced in the country. There are regular elections, parties shift power, presidents change as well as governments. So from that perspective, there's been multiple generations now who've grown up within the idea that they're not going to go back to strongman rule, essentially. They're not going to go back to a time when rights were decided by one person as opposed to the constitution and by democratic choice. And as a forward-thinking, economic powerhouse, and as a forward-thinking democratic ally, of the West in Asia, in the Asia-Pacific region, it was obvious that a move like this, which had no obvious national security necessity, and which was clearly tied into a corrupt personal reason, there had to be a reaction, a backlash from people. And I think it was quite obvious that parliamentarians would fight tooth and nail to preserve their power and democracy that goes alongside it, and that people too would come out onto the streets to say, we reject the idea that we're going to go back here 5 decades in South Korea. We're very happy where we are. We like our system. We enjoy our rights and responsibilities, and we're going to fight to keep them. So it was a tremendous miscalculation by the president to even engage in this path in the first place. The idea the North Koreans were subverting any more than usual, I don't think holds water. There's no evidence to suggest that's the case. What was, though, very evident was that people close to the president, notably his wife, were being investigated by Parliament. And one way to stop those investigations would be essentially to try and suspend normal politics and normal rule, remove perhaps the people who were launching the investigations and move away from that. So of the two competing theories, North Korean threats to the country, which do exist. I mean, South Korea is in a constant state of awareness with the North Koreans, number one. And number two, the sort of threats to his personal family and people in his circle, it would seem much more likely that the personal corruption issues were the ones that forced him to act. And I would just add that even if there was a North Korean threat, why would it need martial law to be resolved? South Korea is a democracy that's got strong allies in the region and beyond, with the US in particular, backing it. Why would it need martial law in order to enact this? This, to me, seems much more likely that he was trying to settle domestic scores by putting into place something that wasn't needed for national security, but was needed to save his presidency. The most important allegation that he's facing is that his wife has been accused of influence peddling, i.e. basically selling influence from the presidency for money. So this is obviously quite a serious charge. There was a sense that she was going to get investigated and found guilty of this, and that obviously would have been a devastating blow to him as well. So all of the allegations were in the realm of corruption, though, that sort of setup. And I think when you look at the trail, if you like, since the election of the prosecution, as it were, getting closer and closer towards family members and inner circle members, you can see why there might have been a foolish but a real imperative to act. If he is impeached, it would be a success for South Korean democracy, because he's clearly gone ultra vires in terms of what he should have done. And when a leader makes a mistake of such magnitude that it threatened the very system upon which they sit, there can only be one outcome. It has to be impeachment. This isn't, Communal Garden, a mistake. This isn't, Bill Clinton in the 1990s and an intern. This is an absolute abuse of the very workings of democracy. So for South Korea to restore that, either essentially he needs to resign or he must be removed by parliament, because otherwise there is a sense that democracy is in stasis. There is a faction here that thinks it can act, in contravention or, without parliament support, and then a faction there that will be trying to stop that, and that paralyze South Korean politics. That'd be very problematic indeed. So really, for South Korea's sake, he really needs to go, and the only question is how he's removed, whether it is through his own choice or through an impeachment process that leads to his departure. Any unrest like this that threatens the internal stability of an ally is a problem for the US in particular, but for other democracies in the region. As we know, if there are crises in countries, enemies can choose to act and seize opportunities there. So one thing to watch out for is, are the North Koreans going to try and take advantage of this in some way to destabilize the military balance on their peninsula, or do something else. Now, the likelihood of that is slim now because it's been resolved so quickly. Martial law came and went. It was obvious that Parliament's will would be adhered to, and the president's had to back down. So I think the immediate crisis is over. But were there to be a second round, or were there to be further instability, yes, there could be huge problems in terms of kind of maintaining stability, not simply within the Korean Peninsula, but beyond, because of course, one thing in that tinderbox of a region can easily spark reactions elsewhere that could draw neighbors in. And that's the last thing that we would want at this moment in time, given the multiplicity of problems in other parts of the world that the US and allies like the UK are facing today.
뭘 끊는 거야? 뭐 하자! 빠져!
아니, 기자분들 앞으로 가세요. 기자 앞으로 나가세요. 앞으로 가세요. 앞으로.